The day before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, Pierre Poilievre spoke out for the group that he says faces the most hate-based violence. Christians? Yeah, he actually said that. Here's the clip.
100 churches have been burned. You hear almost nothing from the Liberal government about this. Christians may be the number one group that is victims of hate-based violence. But of course, it's not politically correct to say that. 100 terrorist attacks against Canadian churches.
Before I say anything else, I just want to remind you guys that these resources are available, and I'm going to be talking about some upsetting stuff, so if that's not something you're up to today, that is totally fine, and I'll see you next time. The context here is that after the discovery of unmarked graves at residential school sites about 4 years ago, there was a string of incidents where churches were vandalized and burned. But even as Indigenous leadership and residential school survivors have spoken out against this, residential school deniers have been using these arsons as a weapon to decry what they claim is an impact of a mass grave hoax, which is grotesque, especially when you consider headlines like this. As for Poilievre's claims, I'm calling for backup. Pam Palmater, can you break down Pierre's lies?
Hey Rachel, just when I think Pierre Poilievre cannot get any more disgusting, he goes and opens his mouth. First of all, he tries to claim, days leading up to this National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, that the number one victims of hate crimes are Christians. That's nowhere near factual. If you were to look at basic statistics, he'd find out that the number one victims of hate crimes when it comes to religion are Jewish people and Muslims. Oh, and his claim that there's been 100 churches burned down by terrorists? First of all, that's not the definition of terrorism. Second of all, there's only been 24 confirmed cases of arson. There's more than 12,000 churches across the country. That's not even 0.02% of churches. So give me a break, Pierre Poilievre. But do you want to talk facts? Facts are Canada was built on historic and ongoing acts of genocide, confirmed in the National Inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Thousands of Indigenous kids were abused brutally. Some even lost their lives. Some we don't know even where they are. So give me a break. The least we can do is honor the residential school survivors and the families of kids who never made it back home today and make a commitment to end all of the injustices that continue in the present that had its origins in Indian residential school days.
Thanks, Pam. And she's right to call out the present day impacts. Indigenous women are 4 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to be victims of violence. And Indigenous folks are murdered at 6 times the rate of non-Indigenous folks. And Statistics Canada itself says, quote, previous research had suggested a link between this violent victimization and past and present colonial policies, including the residential school system, marginalization, and institutionalized racism. I also reached out to Indigenous Studies scholar Sean Carlton, who has written extensively about residential school denialism. He said this is not a coincidence. He said Poilievre's conservatives are courting the Christian right for political and financial reasons and are deliberately engaging in this residential school denialism. What do you think of all this?